Hello. Our next guest is a great chef named Jeremy Law, who runs a restaurant in North Carolina called SoCo. And they're in the middle of some changes right now, some exciting things happening for them. Somebody who is very active locally as a business owner, and somebody who also I've known for a while and who is somebody I consider very creative and someone that I'm very excited to introduce to all of you today. So let's bring him on in 1 second. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love your show.
Thank you. So, presenting Jeremy Law, you are chef and owner or co-owner of SoCo Restaurant in North Carolina.
Yep.
That's one of your projects that is something you're in the middle of changing a little bit right now.
We are. Actually, it's a dramatic change. So we've had a roughly 40-seat restaurant on our 11-acre horse farm now for about 10 years, and we've loved it. It's been amazing. We started doing weddings probably the past 6-7 years. We had a B&B as well, and it was great, and we loved it. And we kind of built it from the ground up to be what it is. Excuse me. And after about 10 years, I think we felt we wanted to make a little bit of a change, maybe pick out some of the stuff that we love the most and focus on that. Also, I'll just tell you that as much as we love this place, I think, call it old age, call it narrowing the focus, but it's a challenge to share where you live with your business. And I think that a couple weddings, in a row where we had 100 people just kind of roaming the farm, and they were great, and it was a great wedding. They were great weddings, but I think we just kind of wanted to start separating the work and the life, and we wanted to focus on just the restaurant. So we are moving the operation basically to about a half hour east, and we bought a 125-year-old house, and we're renovating it. The house was supposed to be demolished. We loved it the instant we saw it, and the thought of that house getting knocked down just broke our hearts. So we were looking for a restaurant space, and that became it. And we had to move it. So we had to put the house on a truck and drive it about 3/4 of a mile, about a kilometer, up the hill from where it was. And they've been doing the inside reno. They're going to build a kitchen off the back of the house. We're not going to live there, but we're going to work there, and we're going to be open probably twice the number of nights a week. So we're really kind of shifting the focus to just be the restaurant. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited about the house. We're just ready for a change. So the 10 years was good to us here, but we're really looking forward to the next chapter, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, I followed a lot of your restaurant posts with all your photos, and it's just so interesting. Can you just kind of can you give a description of what you think your style of cooking is? Because I find it very eclectic and very creative.
Okay, those are very kind words. Sometimes I feel like it's splintered, disjointed, unfocused, but eclectic and creative sounds a lot better. Which kind of, I guess, would get into the ADD part of it, because I went through college with that being undiagnosed, and not so much that I needed pills. I think I just needed an explanation, and I needed to figure out how my brain does and doesn't work. But I was still undiagnosed when I found professional cooking, and it worked perfectly. For the exact reasons I think most people understand, which is in a professional kitchen at any given time, you've got, 8 or 10 different things going on at once. And that's the only time I don't have to listen to all the crazy voices in my head, is when I'm busy. Kind of like you alluded to earlier, like with my drumming hobby, your whole body's doing stuff, and there's no time to listen to the nagging, critical, anxious voices in your head. So the style, I think, has developed over the past decade. And I was cooking before that too, but it's really, I think I really figured things out the past 10 years, but it's upscale home cooking, I think I would describe it as. Because of the name SoCo, we were kind of thinking Southern comfort food, but maybe with a little twist, with a little, just a little je ne sais quoi there. Chefs like the French words, but
Yeah.
but the best thing about it is, I think that as long as it's kind of in that home cooking, like upscale home cooking niche, I'm able to cook whatever I want. And a lot of times the menu here would change sometimes every 2 weeks. I'd see a show, or I'd find an ingredient, or we would travel somewhere and I'd come back after having, it could be something crazy, like just an aspiring slice of bread. Maybe it was a complicated foie gras dish. Who knows? But I could come back here and put my own spin on it. And I felt like as long as I was passionate about it, and I've always cared very deeply about the experience of our guests, those are the two main criteria, like passion and love. And it all kind of worked out from there. And I think that because we've always kept that level of concern for the food and for our guests, I think that's in great part why things have gone well for us here at the restaurant. But the style, I mean, eclectic and creative, but a lot of it's kind of upscale home cooking. I think that's where I started cooking, was with my mom in the kitchen, and so it kind of grew out of that, I guess.
Yeah, and when you first started working for restaurants, like, was that because you just needed a job at the time, or was it because it became an interest and you thought, I want to see what this is about? Or like, do you have certain restaurants and chefs that really took you under their wing? And because it looks like it looks like you went to cooking school, or it
No,
really looks like your dishes have those techniques that a normal person would not have,
like I said, I've been lucky enough to spend, I've been cooking for 20 years professionally, but I've been able to spend the past 10 years here doing whatever I want, working on whatever aspects I wanted to. So I was really, really lucky in that regard. I don't think there's no alchemy or magic in what I do. I just happen to have all day to do it. Whereas a lot of home cooks, they're working real jobs and when they come home, they've got like an hour, and I've got the luxury of time. And so that's probably been the greatest asset. And that's probably why I've gotten to, I guess, move things forward. But I don't know, when I got into cooking, when I look back at the stuff I was cooking when I first began, it's almost embarrassing. But I like the stuff we've done over the past 10 years here. And even though the new restaurant will be a little different, we won't have, here we had a pre-feed menu. You bought tickets, 4 courses. We didn't turn tables. So if you came for the 6 p.m. seating and you wanted to sit here until 10 or 11, that's fine. You have your table the whole night. I was the only one in the kitchen. Kimberly was the only one out front, and we were small. So a full night for us was 24 people.
Yeah.
So it'll be a little different than that. I'll have help in the kitchen. We'll have a bar. We'll have a few more seats, but I think the essence will be the same for us. So I'm hoping even a few years from now, I'm looking back on what we were doing here with the realization that maybe we've made progress in the new space as well.
Yeah, and it looks like you've also gotten good publicity locally, and people have become to know, about your restaurant, and that's like amazing. And for you, like, when you think about some of the publicity you got, or some of the ways you're involved locally, like, how did you get involved locally? It looks like you have different suppliers that are in your region or local, and is that part of your philosophy, or that just happened naturally?
I don't know that. I think in this business, especially when you're as small as we've been, because we're even for the area, we're a pretty small restaurant. Because when for the past 4 or 5 years, we only had about 40 seats, and we didn't always use all of them. It was, like I said, a full night for us was 24 people. Having the access that we've got in this area of Eastern North Carolina. We're just over an hour and a half to the beach. So sometimes, depending on the menu, we could drive down with a big cooler and pick up seafood caught off the waters of North Carolina. There are poultry farms. There are lots of, there's one farm that does poultry including guinea hens and pheasant, and they do rabbit. I use a lot of rabbit. There are 2 or 3 small organic vegetable farms within 10, 15 minutes of here. And since we were small, the farmers could call us up and say, hey, I've got 6 pounds of this heirloom tomato, and it would be plenty for us to get through the weekend. Whereas a lot of other restaurants would have needed 2 or 3 times that. So we were lucky because of our scale and because of the area. But I mean, whether you're in Raleigh, which is 45 minutes west, or towards the beach, or south or north a bit, I mean, it's a great place to have a restaurant because you're close to the ocean. You've got farms. The growing season is long. That wasn't something that we planned, but it was something that we were really fortunate to have, that was established here already before we opened the restaurant. The other stuff is we do a few things with Wilson. There are a couple fundraisers that we've done that we do regularly with, for example, the Kids Museum in Wilson. But for the most part, all that stuff happened organically. And it's become part of our philosophy and approach, but it was really what worked the best, and it was what we felt the best about, I think.
Yeah. So now that you're kind of like in this new place of creating something new, and everything's kind of come to a halt with COVID, like, has that made you rethink anything? Has that changed anything? What kind of realizations have you had during this past month or two, or 2 months, I guess, now?
Yeah. Well, so we were really lucky in that we dodged the bullet, that we weren't open. If we had been open in the current location here where I'm talking to you from, it would have been tough because for the most part we were a special occasion place, and even though we didn't have a lot of staff that would have to get laid off, it would have been tough because we're not really built for takeout. We're not conveniently located. I mean, we're 15 minutes from a 50,000 person city. Excuse me. It would have been tough. And I've got a few friends that run restaurants that have made a pretty successful transition to takeout and to grocery services, but it's not easy. And especially if you're talking about a fine dining or a casual fine dining restaurant, I don't know how you replace your dine-in business with takeout. Pizza joints, burger joints, a lot of ethnic locations, I think they were ready for it, and they've been doing pretty well. For us, we knew we were going to be doing construction at this point in time, so we were very lucky with that. Knock on wood, mostly wood. And whatever happens, I think in the next few months will be okay, because construction on the restaurant will probably be ready in June or July. Are we going to be able to open then? Is North Carolina going to allow restaurants to open? Are we going to be only able to open at, say, a 25% capacity? 25% for fine dining restaurants probably not going to cut it. Would we do that? I don't know. The nice thing is that we own the building, we own the land, and luckily the loans that we've got on it are interest only for the next 12 months. Some of it might have been on a credit card, but it's all ours. There are no other owners, and we're kind of calling the shots. The other advantage, I think, or maybe it's a shared disadvantage, is that if we aren't able to open, excuse me, sorry, I'm getting verklempt. It's the virus.
Yeah.
If we're not able to open, then really a lot of people are going to be in the same boat. If we're having trouble repaying loans, I think the whole country is going to be in that boat. And I feel like hopefully we still will have a little bit of leeway if we can't stick to our timeline. At the end of the day, we don't control any of this. We're making the best decisions right now that we can. We know we want a restaurant. Our commitment to that has never changed. And if we can open in the fall, it'll be amazing. And if we can't really open, because we don't want to do takeout, that's not really what we do. I don't want that to be people's first impression. I want them to come experience the restaurant for what it is and what it should be. So if we really can't open properly until December or January, I think we're okay with that. And we're just going to make the best of it. Because the older I get, I think like everybody, you realize you have almost no control over anything. Like
Yeah.
I can barely control myself. So I think we still feel really good about it. We know we've got to keep pushing. We've got a couple other loans I think we need to get for the project, probably sooner than later, because they might reel in lending more than they already have. But we're surprisingly less stressed than I think we should be. We're going to keep working hard, and it is what it is, and we're going to
Yeah.
have a rest. So I
And
don't know, but yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think from what I know about you, I think that is part of your personality, is to kind of go with the flow,
Well,
or
sort. So that's what I strive for, and that's what I need to do, and that's what everybody needs to do, because if you kick and scream through your days, it doesn't help anybody, and no one wants to be around you, and you're miserable. And so that's what I try. That's what I aim for. But I think I came by very honestly a good degree of anxiety and, what should I say, predilection for preferences. Um, for all the wonderful things about my mother, she was one that would classically, she really wanted circumstances to be perfect, whether she was going to start reading a book, whether she was going to make a phone call, whether she was going to start writing a writing project. She used to write, she did artwork, but circumstance needed to cooperate. Like, all the planets needed to align, and the moment needed to be just perfect, for all of it. And I think that ties in with the anxiety. And unfortunately, the annoying part of me wants everything to be perfect. So I have worked very hard to try to realize that I control almost nothing every day. And I try to be more of you put in work, but then you got to go with the flow. Like, you can't fight circumstance. You can't fight the universe. You'll never win. But part of me still wants to fight the universe from the moment I get up. And I'm trying to unlearn that. So,
well, I
I don't
mean,
know.
that's kind of interesting to share that. And I wanted to just point out that, like, you're not really that aware, but you do kind of have like a Southern accent, but you're not originally from the South, because I mean, you moved a ton, right? Like, you moved so much as a kid. Your father
This
was
is the farm here that we are soon to move from. I feel like I need to talk like this. So we're going from the farm, and we's a fixing to move. So the farm. I'm sorry if anybody was offended. Not really. Hopefully, all your listeners are from Canadian.
that's my audience I'm targeting, Jeremy. How'd you know?
All right, edit that out. No, the farm here is actually, it's home number. If you count my college moves, it's home number 37 for me, and I'm 46.
That's exhausting. And just the fact you have that list in your head's exhausting.
That's the ADD. At some point I had 5 minutes, and rather than sit down and relax, I figured out how many places I had lived, including apartments during college. I don't know.
Yeah, and so if we talk just a little bit about that, like, you've had to adapt quickly to different environments,
Yeah, I mean, it's good and bad. Now, I don't know if you were referring, because I know that that my father was career military for 22 years. I don't know if you're referring to that, or if you're just referring to my apparent nomadic lifestyle, restless. I don't know. Either.
Both, sure.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. Am I allowed to speak French on this show?
Sure.
All right, I fucking hate moving. That wasn't French. Pardon my French. I love that. Anyway, again, sorry for the offense. I hate moving. I've done it a ton of times, and I think I finally figured out it's actually the stuff. So this time, I hope to get rid of a lot of things before we do move. But the recent moves didn't involve so much adaptation, but certainly when I was younger, because we might be somewhere a year, we might be somewhere a year and a half, and a lot of times, this was the best part. So at all the schools we left, and some of them I was pretty young, like third, fourth grade, I'd have to go to the librarian who was in charge of the school books, and I would have to totally lie to her that I had lost my books. And she would say, which one? And I would say, oh no, I lost all of my books. And I don't know if since those librarians, those conversations with librarians, if I've seen anybody so utterly disappointed in me as a human. um,
That's their livelihood. That's what they want to control, you know?
But my parents had already talked to the principal, but the principal, he or she would say, well, I can't be in the business of just selling school books. So I had to be the fall guy. Lost all my books. Hey, idiot kid, lost all his books, threw his backpack down a ravine. And then we would move usually partway through the school year, and then mom and dad would homeschool me, for the remaining 2 or 3 months. And then somehow I'd graduate from fourth grade or whatever it is. But we did that, I think, at least 4 or 5 times. We moved during the school year and had to kind of make that that adjustment. So recently I didn't have to deal with stuff like that, but having grown up like that, I still wonder if it didn't make me like a little weird. I think it did. Which is why the drums are great, because you get to hide behind the drums. And then when you're the chef, you can hide in the kitchen.
I hadn't thought about those things.
I mean, I love people and I love coming out and seeing people, but it's got to be limited. Like when I'm done cooking, I feel like I'm like an overstimulated cat. You grab his tail and you just rubbing the cat the wrong way. And I come out in the dining room and I want to say, hey, and then everyone's like, hey, everything was great. And I'm like, all right, got to go now. And then and I disappear. I don't know. The adjustment when you move around it was weird as a kid, because you want to fit in, you want to start over fresh, you want to forget that you got dumped by a cute girl, and you want to reinvent yourself, and you want to, like, how can I be a cool kid? And it just, one place I'd be a jock, and the next place I'd be hanging out with the theater guys, and the next place I'd be hanging out with the skaters. And I don't know.
But that's part of your ADD. You get to try out all those personalities and voices, right?
I don't know if any of them were me. I don't.
Yeah.
But then so I married someone who lived in one house the entire time growing up. Her mother grew up from a newborn in the house directly next door. And then she got married and bought the house right next to her parents' place. And then my wife grew up in one house for 20 years until she went off to college. So I don't relate to that. I am who I am, but if I had children, I don't know if I'd want to move around all the time or not. I love moving because we always got to move right when the big book report was due. Like, everyone's sweating it out, and they're reading the book, and they're like, what does this mean? And it's got to be like, a 30-page book report when you're in second grade. And I was like, see ya.
Yeah. No, it's very intense. I mean, I think it has a lot of impact because, I mean, we recently moved 6 months ago, and I've moved a bit, but my children never really had. And we came over from France, and they had to start the school year in October, which means everyone already knew each other. Everyone has their friends from who knows how many years.
Yep. And
that was pretty intense. A new country. Luckily, they're bilingual, but they're not used to, that was hard to fit in, I think, a little. And they did a good job, but I feel like that was hard for them. I know it was. I remember my youngest one, Claire, coming home. Like, she was so excited before the first day, because in her mind, she was thinking, if I go back to school in October instead of when everyone goes back, like September, they know I'm the new kid and everyone's going to be so awesome to me and everyone's going to welcome me. And that didn't happen. Like,
really?
No. And so she was just like, she came home the first day just crying, like, and then she went to all these classes. And then at the end of the day, the principal went up to her and said, by the way, that's the wrong schedule. Here's all the right classes and all the right teachers with all the right students. And so she just lost it when she came home. She was just like, I got to do it all over again, And now they're somewhat adjusted, but now they're doing school at home with the COVID thing. So, they're ready to get out there. But I just think I'm so proud, I would say, that they were able to adapt pretty quickly, but I can't imagine what it would be like to do this every year.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
and
it's a mixed bag, but there's good. I mean, it's like everything. There's good and bad.
yeah, and the other thing is like you were an only child, and so you lived it. You're very close to your parents, like I feel like you guys were really tight. So you were one of them maybe, but like you didn't have a brother or sister where like you guys can go to school together or like be
No,
on the bus together or any kind of protection, like eat lunch together or something. It was just you.
if I got my ass kicked, I was on my own. Like when the bullies chased you off the bus, I either I had to stick up for myself or I had to run really fast. I had two choices. Yeah, I don't know. It was. I didn't mind not having siblings. I think. Well, I don't know. I don't know what it would have been like. Sometimes I think it would have been great. My parents never told me if they only had one kid because either they got it right the first time because, hello, I'm perfect, or I am so horrible a person that they were like, no more kids. God, please, no more kids.
It's either one or the other. It can't be any other reason, right?
And I never asked them, I think with good reason. So, yeah, only child. I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, I would never take anything back or change anything about growing up because it's led me to where we are here. Um, Led me to cooking, led me to the restaurant. Um, are there things that were unpleasant and less than ideal? Yeah, there were many of them, but if you start picking and choosing and changing any of those things, then who knows where you'll end up. So I'm just gonna, even though I have no choice, I'm just gonna keep it all. It's just, it is what it is. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was definitely an experience.
Yeah, and so you're on this somewhat fast track. You had this restaurant for 10 years and then you guys decided, okay, we're gonna do something else. We need a slight change it up, do things that make more sense for us or whatever. And but before all of that, a couple years ago, you lost your parents, like
Yeah,
pretty one after the other. And I think that must have been pretty intense experience.
I mean, I
That
was
you
able
had.
to a little bit because I was a philosophy major in college. Sorry, that was smart ass. It was weird, and I think that I will steal something from my father because when his parents died, in fact, they died back in '85. One died in June, and the other died, I guess, in January of '86. So pretty close together. And uh, one of our family members asked him how he was doing, how he felt, and he said he felt like an orphan, and that was exactly how I felt. His mom died mid-October of 2017, and then Dad died in April of 2018, and it was a lot of roller coaster emotions, and it was a lot of challenges because I had limited time to travel to Denver, which is where they were living. Um, because obviously, if it's me and my wife running the restaurant, our livelihood is tied to the restaurant being open. And so, Dad was, so mom had been sick for a while. It was MS and cancer. The cancer was in remission, then it wasn't. The MS was always there, and that kind of went downhill. And unfortunately, she was sick for the better part of a decade, and then really sick the last couple of years. Dad took care of her to the exclusion of taking care of his own health. And when mom died, turns out he was already in stage 4 cancer. So our run in the restaurant made it tough to go back and forth. So I'm forever grateful for a couple of other family members that were able to go out on a few occasions and help out. The day mom died, we had a wedding here. We had a 100-person wedding. I,
Wow.
I flew out the first thing that next morning. My uncle was already there. I'm insanely grateful for that. So he was there with Dad. Um, I was there when Dad died. Uh, there's an insane story there that hasn't been told, and I don't know if it gets out. I'll tell you. Was it the week my dad died? He got moved to hospice the last week, and those people are saints. I've never seen anything like hospice workers. I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they don't cry themselves to sleep every night. What they do is amazing, and there aren't words for me to even really express what I think about that hospice experience. But Dad was very well taken care of the last week, so I was out there the last week. The crazy thing was that weekend. So that week he was about to be transferred to hospice. We were supposed to have a wedding, and Kimberly said, "You can't come back. Like, you just can't." And I was like, "This is a big wedding. I mean, I'm the kitchen, and even for the weddings, I was the only one doing the cooking, with very rare exception over the past 10 years." She said, "You can't come home." And so we made a plan, and I walked her through the menu, and we spent 3 or 4 days on the phone. I mean, she's really good in the kitchen, but she's trying to organize the whole wedding. She's trying to get everyone, you know, what should I say, shuttled here and there, get the work out front of the house arranged with our employees, get all the product ordered. And she cooked the entire menu for 70 people.
Wow.
There were a few minor meltdowns, even though I think she was cooking it all perfectly. It was just an amazing amount for her to take care of. And I walked her through the menu. And the day after my father died, the wedding was here. And the bride and groom insisted that Kimberly call me because they wanted to call and tell me how amazing everything was, because she had told them that I cooked all the food and then flew out that morning.
Oh.
She wouldn't let me tell them. I really wanted to tell them. But she was like, "It's not about that. They had a good time. Leave it alone, because next thing you know, if someone thinks I did the cooking, then they're going to complain. Who knows?" But so yeah, the day after Dad died, we had a big wedding here, and I had nothing to do with it. I'm still impressed by that. But yeah, losing them both in such short amount of time was pretty surreal. I think it is for everybody. I think you're always the kid. They're always your parents. It doesn't matter what your relationship's like. It doesn't matter how much you do or don't talk. Because my parents were pretty private, which is another one of those things I think I've really tried to get past that, because I'm probably fine if I don't talk about my feelings for weeks. Maybe a little bit here and there. It's okay as a guy to get angry,
Yeah.
but
yeah, I know.
that's where you. My parents were very private, but we were still really close. The relationship wasn't perfect, but I loved it. I think it was fantastic. It was as good as it could have been, considering all the people the three of us were. It was weird. I mean, I still wear my dad's dog tags. I still put on his wedding band sometimes, on my pinky. I have fat hands. I think about him all the time. I especially think about him, like, the past 5 weeks when I've been taking care of my 3-month-old nephew, and I wish I could ask him how I was as a child, because there's no way I was as easy as this kid I'm taking care of now. But yeah, it's always tough. It's not there's never a good time, I think, to lose your parents. I think everybody would probably agree with that. Well, most everybody. And it would be, if they didn't die till I was 80, I would still feel like the kid. It would still suck. I mean, you can be grateful, but then you kind of have to acknowledge the fact that you're very unhappy about, the changes, and there would have never been a good time to lose them. But to be honest, as at their ages, it sounds weird. I'm kind of glad they're not alive for this virus bullshit, because I'd be really worried about them, because I know they'd still be living in Denver. And they'd be part of the prime group of vulnerable citizens in this country. So things happened the way it did, and I guess if nothing else, I'm kind of glad they're not having to deal with this garbage right now. But yeah, it was definitely weird. But I had some great family, and Kimberly was a Johnny on the spot. I don't know if you guys use that phrase, but
I will.
And after cooking that for that wedding, she came out to Denver, and she helped me go through the house. And my parents had about 2 homes worth of belongings in the one house. And she put me in one room, and she said, "Okay, pick the stuff that you're going to save, and then the rest of it I'll go through, and we'll either sell it, we're going to donate it, we're going to throw it out." And my parents had stuff, Amy, my parents had stuff that you would have recognized from high school. They had stuff that is in pictures from my childhood, like tchotchkes on the shelves and books. It was not just that did my parents die, but I was essentially physically sorting through my entire life with them, which that was about my limit.
Yeah.
If I hadn't had help with that, I think I'd still be living in that house, weeping as I put things in the garbage.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. So
God.
it was crazy, but we kept the restaurant going. And when I came back to the restaurant, and I remember the first dinner we cooked when I came back, I was so happy. I was so happy. I was still thankful for my parents. Glad we got to process everything with the house. But when I came back and I got back in the kitchen and I came back out in the dining room and everyone was happy, I mean, I really needed that. And I think the restaurant it's always been exactly what I needed. Both the creative outlet and then social activity and the feedback, and
Yeah, like the emotional support that comes with it.
we've got some amazing regulars. We've got some amazing customers, and they're chomping at the bit for us to get this new place open as we are. So it's bizarre. After 20 years of cooking, we've been lucky. I've been lucky. It'd be easy to be burned out at this point, but I'm more excited about the next phase than I have been about anything I've done yet. So
Yeah.
the cooking has always been really, really good to me. So I can't think of anything negative to say other than I wish I didn't have to wait for this virus to clear out if it ever does. But if that's the worst part of it, I think I can handle it.
Yeah. So as far as cooking goes, and you said you kind of started off by cooking with your mom,
Yeah.
uh, are there special meals that she made that you just loved?
Yeah. I mean, invariably there are. And I would say with her because so all the ADD kind of came from her side of the family. Um, I don't know if she had it when I finally got diagnosed. There we go. When I finally got diagnosed, she really wasn't comfortable talking about it. And when I asked her about my childhood and why she never, she was a nurse. I asked her why she never thought about the ADD thing. She didn't really want to discuss it. I know she had high anxiety, kind of like I do, and those two always go together, the ADD and the anxiety. Not always, but usually. I know she had anxiety. I do have a point. The
Don't
way that she
ADD on me now, please.
squirrel. The way she cooked, she had some things that she really loved making. Linguine and clam sauce. She had some really beautiful stews. I mean, obviously, for us, holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas were over the top. And she would spend, there were only three of us, and she'd spend, 4 or 5 days preparing a lot of the food. It was less about like core dishes in her repertoire, and more about just the way that she was and the way that, like, the role that food played for the family. We went years in a lot of places without television. Obviously, we grew up in a time when there really wasn't much to speak of in the way of video games or major distractions. There certainly weren't any cell phones. And we spent a lot of time around the table eating. It didn't matter where we lived. We lived in Spain for a while. We lived in Virginia, California, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, wherever. The dinner table was always kind of the anchor. The kitchen was always the anchor of the house. We had some amazing kitchens. We had some crappy kitchens, but that was always where we gathered. And it was just the vibe of the kitchen. And Mom was comfortable there, and I was comfortable there. And I can only think of one dish that she made that I didn't like, and it was this god awful. I love Mom. Sorry, Mom, wherever you are. It was this god awful casserole. And I think the worst part was it was served in a clear dish, so you could see the tortilla chips, you could see the tuna fish, you could see the peas. And at the time I was 7, I remember she put it on the table, and I remember just looking at the dish. But we never stressed about food. If I didn't want to eat it, I didn't have to. She didn't make a second meal. All I had to do was I had to take one bite. And I think I even might have gotten through the tuna casserole. But for her, it was a vibe. She just kind of created this energy in the kitchen, and that kind of set the foundation for how I saw food as kind of being like a way to bring people together. And because, you know, we have to eat, it should be good, it should be pleasant. Eating with other people, it's even better. It's amazing, in fact. Um, Everywhere we travel, like I get to share meals with friends, or it's Kimberly and I, and you can't even, I mean, you know, you can't even describe how much better it is when you get to share good food. And that was probably more of what she instilled in me than, you know, any kind of recipe. She had some amazing go-tos, but it was never really about that. It was just kind of about the role the kitchen played and the role the food played. And when my undiagnosed ADD brain was coming out of college, out of which I dropped out, um, I casually accepted a professional cooking job, and I loved it. I loved it. Not just because there was lots of cocaine at the restaurant.
Was there?
It's very bad. Children don't do drugs. I don't know if you have any children viewers.
But wait, let's go back. Did you do cocaine?
Maybe if, what's that? Oh, someone's calling me. No, maybe.
Wouldn't that have made you more anxious?
No. So the first answer is maybe a couple hundred times. And so, so the great thing about cocaine. So let's back up. So I went through those early years of cooking, and cocaine, when I got a little bit of it, it would last me a while. And when I did it, it was the only time that my brain was quiet. It seems like everyone else, it speeds things up. They start talking, they solve all the world's problems. And for me, I was calm and quiet, and it made more sense years and years later. One, why the kitchen was such a great place. So mom made it a welcoming place, but then a professional kitchen, it's crazy, it's frenetic, it's high paced. That's good for the ADD. The cocaine, also apparently good for the ADD, because when I finally did get diagnosed and I was on medication, it's all amphetamines. It's all speed. And unlike everybody else, people with ADD, it calms us down. And so normally I would do a couple gaggers and I could go sit in the corner, or I would go do something else, and I would just enjoy the solitude and bliss and the serenity, which is different. If you don't have ADD, I think it's a different experience. So
yeah, but maybe this is this might be a great commercial for COVID, because a lot of people are anxious right now. So, I mean, maybe you need to pair up with some like cocaine guy out there and kind of promote.
Well, you know what, and not to wax nostalgic like an old guy, but back in my day, they didn't put all the garbage in the Coke like they do now. Like before, it was like baby laxative. Like you might get the runs, but now like they're putting like fentanyl, or they're putting a lot of crazy stuff in it. I wouldn't trust it, but it's weird because it kind of was a gateway to me figuring out my ADD, and finally actually I spent probably 3 years on medications, and then I started to find workarounds. There's no silver bullet, at least for ADD. So I finally figured out what medication worked for me, but it always comes with some trade-offs. So I had focus, I got stuff done, but I started getting cold. I never get cold. I'll wear shorts all winter. I wear shorts all year. I don't get cold. There were lots of little things I wasn't used to that kind of came as side effects, and I didn't like them. So I started finding workarounds, and I think if nothing else, and it probably goes for a lot of other mental enhancements, I think I like my ADD, so I don't see it as any kind of a disability or an issue or a problem. But once you take the pills, you start to see that you can find workarounds. You start to figure out how your brain works and doesn't work. And then you start handling yourself different, and you start maybe setting up your workday differently. I think I will always need the pace of the professional kitchen and the slight craziness. But I haven't been on meds now, or cocaine, for I haven't been on meds for what, 6 years, 7 years, and it's been better. But it did help to be on it for a time. Um, but
Yeah. I like that idea about the self-study because, as you know, I'm kind of like, I'm moving out of the whole yoga world, but that's what it's all about, is all about self-study, you know, like really figuring out who you are and how to transform certain parts of you, not like get rid of them, because what you said is correct. Like, it's great to accept yourself for who you are, and then if there's certain parts that are making things complicated or painful or whatever, then you just figure out how to transform it to make it work to your advantage, you know? So that's really cool that that helped you get there.
yeah,
And that you figured out, like, I need this certain rhythm, this, you know, I need to do this type of thing. Oh, if I'm with people too much, I'm overstimulated, I don't want that. Like, it's good to put all that together. And like, you have that, you have your drums, and then it looks like you also do a bit of biking.
I do a lot of biking. So kind of piggybacking off the ADD, exercise is very helpful for ADD because um, you do have, I don't have the H. I have a problem going to bed, but once I get to sleep, I'd be fine. I can sleep in every day. I don't feel any guilt. I don't get up at 5 a.m. Um, but the exercise helps a lot. I love biking. Um, if I go out for 20 or 30 miles, you get to see a lot. The weather's gorgeous, especially this time of year. I mean, it's amazing. When it's 95 and humid, it's a little less amazing. But the exercise, it helps my brain. Like if I don't exercise, excuse me, I start getting weird. So yeah, the biking's essential for me, and I really enjoy it. And I can get out and about without having to get in the car or, I mean, and I feel better, and it's cheaper than Coke.
And healthier, yeah.
It's much healthier. Yeah, I don't know. The one thing I was, and you can yell at me if asking you questions is not allowed, but so we were in of the 4 high schools I went to, we were together at one of them in Fort Collins, Colorado. And my impression of you, you were always kind of a hippie and easygoing. And when I talk about trying to focus on going with the flow, uh, when you talk about, yeah, we all have our things to work on, our things to uncover and improve and tweak. I never felt like you had anything to work on because you already could do the one thing I was horrible at, which was going with the flow and staying calm. I'm curious, like, what the hell it is that you work on these days?
Oh, first of all, that's interesting that you saw me that way, because I wasn't that go with the flow. I think, yeah, it seems so long ago. I think I
But
had a lot of,
you used to listen to Stevie Wonder.
oh, I still do. I just ordered his piano, greatest hits piano book, and I'm waiting to get it. I'm just like waiting. He's still my favorite. Yeah. But for me, I feel like I've always, and you've had this too, I've had this adventurous side where I want to learn about the world and languages. You've studied Swedish and other languages, and you've lived in Sweden, and you know what it is to live in a different culture and learn new things. And I always had that thirst, you know, to really travel and live in countries where I could learn something new. And I
Right.
really needed that. Like, I didn't have, like, when I was in college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to travel, and my parents kind of let me do those type of things, you know? So I feel like for me, I was always trying to figure it out. And that was always kind of like my thing, is like, am I ever going to figure it out? Am I always going to have shitty jobs, you know, where people treat me like crap because I have a college education, but I'm working in, like, as a secretary with people that have no degrees telling me what to do and treating me not great. Like, that happened a lot. And slowly I figured out, like, I've always enjoyed teaching and yoga movement. I've always been in moving, you know, I like that. And I've never been like into competitive sports. I've always liked to do my own thing. So I feel like when I kind of started to do yoga, I began to just kind of, they call in the yoga world, we say, like, to peel off layers, where you slowly go deeper and deeper. And I realized that I had a lot of wounds, like unfinished business in me. Like I felt unlovable. I felt I didn't love
Really?
myself. Yeah.
That's
And
crazy.
wait, it cut out. Say it again.
I said that's crazy, and that wholly divergent from the impression I had from high school.
Yeah, high school for me, I mean, I was pretty wild from, I would say, 14, 15 years old to maybe 19. I tried a lot of different stuff, did a lot of legal stuff. I was like a rebel, but totally without a cause. And I was just like, pushing my limits. And then I would realize, like, ooh, I don't want to go that route, because I'd see where it leads you by other people. I'd see what happened to them and I'd be like, ugh, no. And then at one point I was like, okay, I'm done with that. But yeah, for the past 20 years, I guess, just uncovering, uh, realizing I didn't think I had the right to take up space, like trying to, and so, realizing those type of things is kind of intense. You're like, okay, now what do I do with that? Like I realized I don't like myself. What do I do with that? Or I have or I have a wound where I feel rejected. Like, what do you do with those type of things when you start feeling like people reject you or let you down, or you don't feel loved? Like, those are really deep
Yeah.
issues. And I mean, it all goes back to like self-worth and self-value. And I just think I was really willing to do some really intense workshops with some intense people where they just broke you raw. Like you were just, my first training was like 10 days with Anna Forrest. She's like this shamanistic type of yoga teacher, this all power, she has that image. She went through like hell and made it through, and has all these techniques. And just like the first time I trained with her, I mean, I just felt like a raw heart, like literally like someone had taken my heart out and just been like, deal with everything, deal with feeling unloved, deal with feeling rejected. And like I did that in Berlin, and I didn't know anybody. And I just remember like the slightest thing like would make me cry because I just felt so broken open, and I was just like, I've got to sit with this discomfort. I've got to sit with this sadness and just get through it, and just really do like, not in a mental way, but just feel what my wounds are, I guess, and so sometimes still issues will come up and I'll be like, oh, that's my weird
That's crazy.
rejection thing, or you know what I mean? And so like I just feel like everyone has so many issues that they can work on if they want to, but it's not easy. It's like, and you have to really take that time to work through it. Like it took you a process, you know what I mean?
So was your how much speaking of siblings, how much of a role did your sister Laura play in sort of helping you maybe delve into some of that stuff?
Zero. Because she was more like, I would tell her about stuff like but she didn't really understand it. She would be like, nah, I don't really get what you're talking about, or I don't have those issues, so I can't relate. But she was always kind of supportive. Like I would be like, wow, I did this workshop and, I figured out so much stuff about myself. I figured so much stuff about our parents. I figured so much stuff about, things that were painful. And I understand so much more about myself now. Or who knows, I feel like sometimes when you figure stuff out, at that moment, you can kind of share it and explain it. But then a year or two later, it's not really living in you anymore because you've dealt with it. And so it's harder to explain because it's not relevant anymore. You know what I mean? So like at the time when I went through those things, I was like talking about it to my husband or a little bit to my sister or my parents. And I think maybe people didn't get what I was saying 100%, but in general, they would understand it, or like, yeah, I remember once, so there's this thing you talk about like reconnecting to your spirit. So it might sound kind of out there, but like who you who you really are. And like when you go through a lot of trauma, you kind of like shut down a little and maybe disconnect. And it's basically just disconnect into really knowing who you are and feeling a love for yourself, a respect for yourself, you know? And I remember once I was kind of dealing with that. For me, it was like a concept when people would talk about it. And I remember I was at my sister's house. It was just the two of us. And I said to her, do you feel like you see your spirit? And she goes, yeah, I totally see it. And I was like, I don't see mine. And she's like, what? And she grabbed me and brought me in the bathroom, and we're like staring at ourselves in the mirror. And she's like, look at yourself. She's like, you're just you. She's like, you're just you. You're not ugly. You're not pretty. You're not good. You're not bad. Like, just look at yourself. Like, you don't see you. And I'm like, no. And she was like, but she got it, you know? And then like later on, I kind of realized like what that means. And that's going to be different for everybody. But I just feel that there's some kind of value and self-respect that I have, or boundaries now that I'm willing to put, whereas before it was more of maybe subconsciously wanting people to love me. And I don't know if any of that makes sense, but you know, there's people out there that are people pleasers, so they're going to say or do things because they want that outside approval. And then at one point you realize that you need to do things for yourself, things that you love, things you're passionate about.
Yep.
And when you're connected to that, you're almost untouchable in a way, like you're just so secure with who you are and comfortable with who you are. And it's just a different feeling, you know? Like I always had a certain confidence, but there was some kind of lack of self-love.
I had no clue. But now that you're telling me all the process you've gone through, now I feel like I'm a hot mess. like I haven't, I don't know. Like I haven't spent that much time on stuff. I feel like things would happen in life and you're forced to evaluate and make changes. I will tell you, I probably didn't do jack as far as like working on myself until I got married. And then once I started having some revelations about what an asshole I can be, I started looking back and I was like, oh yeah, there was that other relationship. Wow, I did that. And then there's other relationship. I was like, oh yeah, that was totally my fault. And I'm looking back and like, it started clicking. I don't know. I've been through therapy a few times, not for anything in particular, but mostly to try to be less of an asshole. I don't know, but I don't know. I guess that the journey's never done, but I never took an organized approach to it. And it's only been because when you get married, you know, you
work on a lot of stuff when you get married.
I mean, when you're single, you can just slack and just be a worthless piece of shit. But when you get married, you kind of need to be something and helpful and whatnot. So yeah, and I will tell you that for all the stuff that you went through, for all the training and whatnot that I didn't do, the restaurant, working with Kimberly, kind of did that for me because we had to learn how to be married. We went to jail together a few times. They don't put you in the same cell. I was really disappointed. That was a joke. But it took us a while to balance it out. But the restaurant, we have always worked together perfectly. We agree on how to do things. We agree on food and wine. We agree on the front of the house. We agree on the back of the house. We agree on the marketing. We agree on a business approach. We agree on making changes. And if we ever had an argument, and they were usually pretty ugly, we always came together to work. And then at the end of the night, at the end of dinner service, we would come back and be like, are we okay? And then we would talk about it because we would have had to work together, and then we did a good job together, and then it didn't feel like, you know, we were opening ourselves up to someone that was just going to say something rude.
Yeah.
So the restaurant definitely helped teach us how to be married, but for me, I guess that was part of the therapy. Yeah, everyone's got stuff to fix, but part of me still, I look at who I am, I wouldn't even know where to start. I feel like if specific issues didn't come up, like I would have no clue. Like, so Kim and I would have an issue and I'd be like, all right, I guess I'll start there.
Yeah.
So it's been a few times, but the restaurant probably helped us more than anything, crazy enough.
Yeah, but I think issues do come up naturally. And so at some point, if you're willing to look at it or go into your feelings and talk about it, then there's always some kind of learning that's going to come out of it. And like, I really believe like in our marriages, if it's a good fit and people are both open, then there's so much room for growth for both people. It's like nonstop almost. And I feel like there's so many things to work on. Like, I feel like I've had to learn so much more about my boundaries and my limits, and not being pushed around or told what to do or those type of things, and had to figure out a way to talk to my husband about certain behaviors that I find difficult. And yeah, and I think all marriages go through that. And then if it's a good fit and both people are willing to look at themselves, then you grow together. And there's a lot of work to be done, but if you have that kind of relationship where you do work things out, then when the next issues come up, even though it feels awful, because one thing I realized is like, because in my mind, I always think like, okay, I learned that lesson. And next time, right? Next time, it will be so much easier. Next time, I won't care as much. Next time, it won't be painful. And the next time always is so different.
Yep.
That you're like, oh God, this sucks again, and then, but one thing I learned, and you don't have to go to workshops for any of this. You can just sit with being uncomfortable sometimes. And I feel like there's so much. So I'll share something very alive in me today, that I recently learned is, and I'm always learning, and sometimes I'm really exhausted because I'm just like tired of learning, like I want to just be calm and just feel like there's nothing to change. Like everything's just right. But like, whoever feels like that all the time, it's total BS, just so you know. Public announcement. What I learned is, first of all, you have to get really comfortable with being uncomfortable and not push it away. But like, I do believe like, so when conflict happens, sometimes if you're too stuck in your head, that's not good, right? So like, it's good to like go ride your bike or go run or go do something physical, because then it kind of like makes things circulate, and then you get a better perspective. Like I really believe as a human, our chemistry is made up like that. We're not made to be, obviously the way our bodies are, we're not made to be sedentary, right? So there's something in that movement. And I also think there's timing. So like, this is what I learned recently. So we had like a big family blowout recently, which I'm sure COVID is definitely doing that to many people, but it's not that we've never had that before. So for me, it has nothing to do with COVID, but some people will try to make me, feel better. Well, it's COVID. I'm like, no, it's no. But what I realized, so like, for example, I have a family, we're 4 at the home and you're just 2. So it would be easier to meet so what I learned is you have to have a meeting at one point, but both people have to be ready and like really honest, be ready. And so like, if there's still a ton of anger or frustration behind it, this is just my recipe. I don't believe it makes sense to talk at that point, because I don't think it will be the best place to have that best time for that meeting, like, so like yesterday we had a blowout, and then there was a day where we were all just super sad and no one was really talking to each other. And I was just like, I just have to be uncomfortable. But at one point something has to change. So I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to each person and ask if each person's ready to have a family meeting. And I went around, I'm really proud of myself. So let's just brag here about this, because so I was like, I went to each person. I spoke to each of my daughters. I'm like, I don't like what happened. I know none of us do. It hasn't been resolved yet. I want us to all talk. Are you okay talking tonight? And they'd be like, yeah. And I'd say, okay, well, there's 2 rules. The first rule is, when one person's talking, no one else can talk. Like no one has the right to talk. And the second rule is, well, there's 3 rules then. Second rule is no screaming, because we're pretty loud. And the third thing is no one can get up and no one can walk away. Like you can't get up and walk away. Like you have to sit here. And so I went to each person in my family, my 2 daughters and my husband, and I was like, separately, I'm like, are you okay tonight? Because if you're not, if you still feel really angry and you're not ready to listen, we won't do it tonight. I'm not saying that to be mean. Like I'm being honest here. Like, let's only do it if we're ready. And so everyone agreed. And then I went upstairs and I found a little stuffed animal. And it's an orca. And I'm like, I came down to our meeting and I'm like, this is the orca. I said, when you're holding the orca, you have the right to talk and no one else does. And I was like, we're in Victoria, there's orcas here, like this is representing our life, our new life here. And orcas live in families for long periods of time, and they have an intelligent way of communicating. And I'm like, so when you have the orca, you can talk. And we had our meeting and each person got to hold the orca. And I said, all we're doing is saying how we feel right now. All you're doing is sharing your feelings. That's it. It's only about you and your feelings. That's all. And we went around like a lot, and we took like an hour and a half or something, and then it was done. Like it was done, like really. And I was like, oh, thank God, but
Really, I think I might steal that. That's a really smart idea.
and you got to figure out what works. So like, because the night before, no, 2 nights before, there was all this tension, and I'm like, well, we need to have a meeting. And it did not go well. There was yelling, people crying, people walking away, people leaving the house, slamming the door. Like it was like, okay, that was obviously not the right time or the right way. Let's try again, right? So I feel like everyone's gonna figure out their way, but yeah. So I just feel like there's always gonna be if you're alive and you're like a living, breathing, feeling person, and you're in a relationship, you're always going to have some kind of conflict or tension or something uncomfortable. And if you can't deal with discomfort, then either you give in, right?
Right.
You give in and you like say whatever you need to say so the person is okay with you again, because you can't deal with them being mad at you. But then you're being like unfaithful to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you can't be unfaithful to yourself, because then you feel shitty after.
I'm learning something here because so my mom's side of the family was French, well, Quebecois, and I'm starting to see that I think maybe my craziness might be due to my being half French, because maybe it's a thing. Because that when my mom's family, my mom was one of 6. When her family, when things got crazy, it got crazy. It was passionate. There were feelings. There was yelling. There was crying. There was no orca, unfortunately. But maybe it's the French thing. Like maybe I'm starting to figure things out.
Well, I mean, that's also part of what's so fun about like the self-study is like, there is a lineage behind you, there are patterns that were passed on. There are things that were passed on to you. Like you can't ignore that either. And so sometimes it's automatic reactions or things that you kind of inherited in a way, you know what I mean? And so when you become aware of that, then you can decide if you keep it or transform it or use it when you think it makes sense. Or if you decide like, oh, I'm so aware of that, I don't want to use that pattern anymore. Like, can I become aware and slowly kind of fade that out? Does that make sense?
Yes, but I think I need to get an orca. But I also say, Kimberly and we're very bad at arguing. We are horrible. We're both private. We are both kind of aggressive, and you got to do it our way or it's not going to work. And maybe talking about, because there's not a lot of feeling talking.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're really bad at arguing. We've gotten better, but I really like just someone's got the floor. You know, even if it's this, you have the LaCroix can. You can speak now, and then you talk about your feelings, and you just talk, and no one's butting in saying, well, "That's not what I meant." There's none of this. I don't know. I really like that idea because like our resolutions never have much structure to them. Like we'll talk, and it's kind of like, well, I was I felt, well, you hurt my feelings when you threw the chair at me. Also, you hurt my head. I mean, I'm kidding. I'm making that up, but it gets ugly, and but at least we've gotten to where we're calming the fights down, but the resolutions apart, we're still kind of working on. And I mean, I can try the orca idea. I mean,
well, it could be something that makes more sense for your region or for your restaurant, or something that, you know, symbolizes what you guys are doing.
All right, Kimberly, you hold the pig. And then
Yeah.
when you hold the pig, you can talk until it squeals going, sweet! And then you got to stop talking. I don't know. No.
Yeah.
We do have pigs around here, but maybe she could hold like an ear of corn or a tobacco leaf. I like the
well, I mean, so there's a guy that a long time ago wrote a book called Nonviolent Communication, and it's a whole way. And he passed away, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something. And it's a thing. It's called Nonviolent Communication, and you can watch him on videos. And he was this guy who grew up in the 40s.
Write that down.
Yeah, and some like, I wish his name's like, normally I know it, and most people will tell you right off the top of their head they would remember his name. Bob? No, it's Marshall something. Okay. Sorry, I wish I knew it because he has videos on YouTube, he has books, and his whole thing is about, so he was basically conflict resolution type person. I mean, in war zones and stuff, right? But he had his own kids and his own family, and he worked at inner city kids and had to deal with who knows what major conflict resolution between gangs and tribes in Africa, and who knows, Palestinian, Israeli, like, right, all these things. And his whole thing was like, our whole need as humans, all we want is someone to listen and someone that understands how we're feeling, and we just want to get our needs met. And it's that simple. And so when we're talking to somebody, so there's so many examples, but we basically just want to know that we were heard and understood, and that recognition, you know. And he has all these examples. He used to do a ton of seminars. Anyone could go. Lots of times it was husband and wife, but lots of times it was maybe a mother and their daughter, or just somebody that just felt like they wanted to learn it. And I did a couple of those trainings, and they were so intense. I mean, I was with groups of people I'd never met before, and you do really interesting exercises where you get to kind of role play a situation. So you go back to like a conflict you might have had, and you do it differently. And it's just so amazing, his ideas about just simply listening. And he gives examples for like, so for example, here's like a simple one. Like you might say to me, Amy, I'm so tired right now. I've been cooking all day. Like, I can't deal with it anymore. Like, I can't cook tonight. Like, I just can't make dinner. And I would say like, well, I worked hard too, and I don't feel like cooking either. God damn it. I work too, right? So like there's two people like that, they're not getting their needs met or recognized. And like, if I had said to you like, wow, it sounds like you're really tired tonight and you don't want to cook. Do you think we should order out? Like, because this is not about me, right? This is just about like figuring out that, wow, he needs me to acknowledge that he feels tired, that he's sick of cooking, you know? And so you might dig deeper. Like I might say, well, would it be helpful if I made dinner? I don't mind. Or if I don't feel like cooking, I'll say, you know, I don't feel like cooking either, but let's order out. And, you know, I totally get that you're tired. Like that's different, right? And so, right?
Yes.
And it's all these simple things, you know, like those, and like he has a super precise method, but I find it's always interesting to find different ways of doing things that are authentic for you, that work for you. So for me, the part of us listening and sharing our feelings sometimes is enough. He has a whole method. Afterwards, you need to get your needs met, and you need to know what your needs are. And like you said earlier, you don't really know what your feelings are. You know how to be angry, and that's super common. That's super common. So like in his book, there's a page of like over 100 feelings. And he says like most people have a range of this, but the real spectrum is like this. And
Yes.
as humans, we need to like experience all of them. But sometimes we weren't really raised in a culture that let us feel other things. Because if you felt sad or crying, someone might have been like, well, toughen up. Your life's not so hard. And then you felt like,
I will tell you something funny. So I was a double major in English and philosophy in college, and I think part of the reason I went into English was when there were issues with the family growing up, or if I did something wrong, I snuck out at night in junior high, and parents found out, and they were really worried and upset. And every time I did something like that, my mom would hand me one of those the I think 8.5 by 17 yellow Big Chief tablets, and she would have me write about what happened and what I was thinking and what I was feeling, and maybe what my thoughts were about similar situations in the future. So anytime I got in trouble, I had to go to my room and write about it. And it wasn't until after my mom died that I started talking to someone about this, and it never struck me. I never heard about my writings. I never found them in the house when we cleaned it out. We never came back and revisited it. I was like, that's more crazy than her making me as a child write about my experience getting in trouble, is that she never came back and revisited it. Like I would write it all out, and then she'd knock on the door and she's like, did you write about it? And I was like, yeah. And I'd be like, here you go, here's my paper. And then I'd hand it out, she would take it and she'd go down the hall. And that was it. I never heard about it again.
I've never heard about. Do you think that was just like she did that because she thought you processed? She thought, oh well, he processed. I let him think about it and feel it, and now we can move on. Or
I think that she has a lot of the same tendencies that I do, and I think that maybe she didn't want to talk about it. Like, and it's not that she did anything wrong. I think that she didn't enjoy conflict, and so she wanted me to process and hope that would be enough. It just never occurred to me till seriously, like, 2 years ago. I was like, wait a minute. She never brought it back up. She never like reviewed. She's not like, so you say here that you were feeling boxed in. We never came back to it. I mean, it's still at the end, but it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, because your feelings were never really acknowledged.
I mean, if she had graded it, maybe like F, you got an F. I don't know, like that was probably backwards, or a C plus. Your feelings get a C plus. I don't know what she would have done, but I mean, sometimes I'd write like 4 or 5 of those long pages, and I never heard about them after. But it never even occurred to me. I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting though, because now like next time things come up, that part of, wow, we never talked about feelings in my house, so it's new for me. So, and that could even be something that you even say to your wife at one point, like, I have to learn to feel certain things again, and
we're both like that.
Yeah, like just when I did because I gave a lot of yoga teacher trainings, and so when you're with a group, you do like several hundred hours together, and you get to those type of things where you talk about those things, and anger comes up often, and then sadness comes up a lot. Those are like 2 feelings that people have that they've kind of suppressed or they feel comfortable sharing. Sadness is not that easy to share in a group. People don't, but as you become comfortable, there might be some sadness there that hasn't been looked at. You don't really know what's going to come up, but they're all worth it. Like all those feelings are so worth feeling, because that's the human experience. And I really feel like I've seen some people just have that small spectrum, and then when they don't know how to feel, and it's just because they were never allowed to, or they were probably like kind of shut up at an early age. You know, like kids that get really excited about stuff and their parents were like, whatever they said, and then the kids feels like, yeah, I can't be happy or excited around my parents. It bothers them. Or if I'm excited at school, the teacher tells me to shut up. Or you just get these messages that kind of program how you're going to act in the world, and then it comes out in relationships. You know,
Yep.
like, so
Well, it was a lot of appearance. It was a lot of glossing over, and not wanting, don't want the neighbors to hear you arguing, don't want other family members to witness any discord. I mean, you want to keep all the conflict private, but then you keep it private, but then it doesn't matter because you still never deal with it. It was kind of crazy, but I mean, I don't know if astrology has something to do with us because we both have the same birthday, which you're not. I know the old rules. You're not supposed to do that, but
I like all that stuff. I mean, I think it's all of it's insightful if you have the right person look at your charts. I think all of it's just a little, gives you sometimes, some information or an aha moment. You'll be like, oh, that's why. And then any type of light that you shine on an issue just makes the biggest difference, just to know that there's an issue or whatever. But like that nonviolent communication book, what I love about it is I love his lists of feelings and needs. And then he says there's so many needs that we have. Like as humans, we need to feel safe. We need to feel recognized. We need to feel heard. We need to feel appreciated. Like these are real things. And sometimes people feel like, oh, they feel guilty. Like, oh, I shouldn't need recognition, or I shouldn't fill in the blank, And so, I mean, there have been like little workshops, and I'm not an expert in this style, but I like to take pieces of it. And what I've done with some of my students is I've given them those lists at times and put them in pairs and had them talk about a conflict and look at those lists and be like, I think I felt, and then they might find like the exact word that because they couldn't find it on their own, but then they're like, yeah, it wasn't, or like they'll find out their need, like, yeah, I need to feel, or you might help them and be like, oh, it sounds like you felt like this. And they'll be like, no, that's not how I felt. And you're like, well, and then they'll look on the list until they kind of, and once you pinpoint, you identify those feelings and needs. For me, it's already like a relief. There's something like, wow, okay, I get it. Like all of these tools are helpful.
Is that a normal part of, or is that standard like yoga training?
No. I just brought that in because I felt that when I was teaching, I wanted to bring in any tools I had that I felt worked and that were helpful and that were relevant. So every year was a little different on how I would train. And some people probably got a lot out of those things, and some might not have at all. You know what I mean? Because those techniques aren't going to work for everyone. So you have to just try them out and see like if it works for you or not. But there's, just basic ways of listening, feeling heard is already amazing. Like that's already huge when you're in conflict.
I think it's tough because a lot of times you don't come into it with the vocabulary. And like you said, you've got the list because you might really need something desperately, but you don't even know what to ask for.
That's one of the key things. And so as you practice that, you become more aware of your feelings, you become more aware of your needs. Because when you don't know what you need, but you expect someone else to sometimes, like you expect somebody else to have figured out what you needed, but you need to be really clear. And that's another thing you learn is like, people can't guess what you want or can't guess what you need. And we think that, like, we project that on people, like, well, he should have known, right?
I'll say two things about that. And one is that I think two things I've learned, which is like in a list of maybe four things that I've learned, which is not many, but it'll add up. One is that even if I think people don't have those words, like I know that when we have a conflict, I might not know what to ask for to say, she might not know, but if you have a safe space where people are allowed to feel their feels, you're allowed to be angry, you're allowed to be frustrated, you're allowed to be sad. If you have safe space, I think that might be as important as anything. And the other thing I've learned is that kind of along with that is that people have a hell of a lot more power and influence than they estimate, because I have seen myself get into an argument with Kimberly, or I've seen myself get frustrated somewhere else and bring that bullshit home. And I can come home or come to work and I can ruin everybody's day. And that's never my goal, but I've seen myself do that sometimes. Conversely, I can get out of bed and say, you know what? This day is going to be fantastic. And I can come to the kitchen, I can go interact with family, whatever. Like even with my 4-month-old now nephew, I feel like I can dictate how it goes. He can be gassy and poopy and cry all day, and I'm like, we're gonna have a good day. Like, I'm gonna get you what you want, even with no speaking. And I feel like when you can calm down and give people safe space, but then you also understand that you are extremely powerful when it comes to infusing positivity, and comfort and safety. Like, that was one thing that never came out in any of the therapy I went to, or any of the people I talked to. Like, they never like, don't underestimate like how your bad mood could spoil everybody's day that you come in contact with. And it's 100% true. I don't know. So 2 things, that's it. That's all I've learned. But
no, but those are huge things, because especially in a group, couple, or a family, you see that a lot. And that's what was making our house so awful yesterday, the past 2 days, was that energy was just affecting everyone. And I just had the heaviest heart, and I was like, and part of it was an issue of my daughter not wanting to communicate properly with my husband and doing slightly manipulative stuff, and it just created really awful environment. And she's young still, and what's interesting is my husband yesterday at one point said, you don't realize, it's exactly what you said, Jeremy, you don't realize the power you have when you say something. The intention behind it sometimes can be manipulative or whatever, and what you don't realize is it's powerful and it affects everybody. So it's like that chain reaction. You say that to me, I get upset, everyone else feels like really uncomfortable, everyone's unhappy, and it's just from one person that decided to act shitty. And that's part of growing up too, and part of being a mature adult and aware of who you are, is like, when you speak, what's your intention? When you say something, is your intention to make someone feel bad or guilty? Is your intention to make them feel good? Like, do you think you have that power? Like, yeah, I'm going to compliment them, and then they're going to be happy. Because and my mom always said, as when we were growing up, and still today, and what you said in the beginning of our interview basically is, you only control yourself, and even that can be hard. And so sometimes with my kids, siblings, they push each other's buttons, and then I'll say, well, don't be a puppet. I mean, don't let them control you. Just, that they know how to make you mad. So if you know that, can you work on that and not let them, because that's giving them that power to make you happy or sad or frustrated or whatever. And kids learn that so young, right? And all humans know how to do it, but you have to know, why am I doing it?
yeah.
Am I looking for a result? Am I hurting right now? Am I so frustrated that I just want to crush everyone because it'll make me feel better?
Misery loves company. Yeah. I've got a lot to work on.
But everyone does. Seriously, everyone does. And I think it's just so interesting to just know what you want to work on, and then you'll get the chance. Don't worry. There'll be that chance to work on it.
I'm gonna hide in the kitchen. I'm gonna hide in the kitchen. I'll look there. See if it's safe. Maybe I'll come out. No, I won't. But yeah, but then what fun would life be if you had it all figured out and you were perfect? That sounds boring.
Yeah.
So
And I think there's no such thing as perfect either. So like that's also like I don't consider myself a perfectionist because the word perfect, I've never had that idea like I want this perfect, but I feel like I want to do things so well all the time, you know? And like you mentioned that too, like that your mother wanted to just have like it had to be set up perfectly
yep.
in order, you know, and people all have that like you want things to be perfect the first time or however you want them to be, you know, you try so hard and that's exhausting sometimes, you know, and like it's not even possible. So sometimes
No.
people have to kind of like let go of that and just know that it's not going to be perfect and it's okay. Like you play the drums. I don't know how much pressure you put yourself under when if you're with a band or something.
Well, I don't I don't play out very often because at my age I really have less of an interest in loading my entire kit up in my tiny car and driving to town. I might play out once a year, and sometimes it's on somebody else's kit. I mean, there's some pressure when you're with the band, but most of the times I play, at least now, um, most people are getting together for fun. I think the expectation is that there's a dialogue, um, and it's a lot of fun. So these days, not so much pressure as there used to be, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I just think of myself like as someone who plays piano and just so how hard it is when you have to play in front of everyone because you always have a concert every year, two concerts a year, and you're just like, I don't want to mess up. And then you do. And then like so like now I'm just kind of like I know I'm gonna mess up at least probably within 3 minutes of my song, probably 16 or 17 times. And I have to just deal with it, you know? And it's so funny because my husband recorded me, we had a concert in February and I afterwards he played it and in my head I thought I did like when I played the concert, I felt like I was playing at a good speed, like the right speed.
Yeah.
And then he played it back and I was like, that is so slow. And he goes, well, you probably just were concentrating so hard because you probably didn't want to mess up. And I was like, he's right. But then it was so slow. But that's what it was. It was just like, I kind of let go over the years, but there's still that, I have that intention. Like I want it to be so good and so perfect. And it's just like, it's never, ever, ever going to be.
So
Like,
are you still playing concerts? Was that in Canada or was that back in France?
both. Yeah. So I stopped piano basically after high school. And then when my kids started, I started again too. So for now 10 years, I've been with them. We have two concerts a year and we started here in Canada and I love it.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's so important to me to have that in my life. But I hate playing our concerts. It's always so stressful, you know, and I
See,
never play as well as I want to ever.
I'm sloppy. The one thing I wish for myself is that so I played drums now for whatever 27 years. I'm a little sloppy. The dialogue is usually good, and I kind of wish I had the side that you've got, where you're probably a bit more regimented. You practice. Like I rarely go to and work on paradiddles or patterns. I just tend to play like I just kind of puke it out. Like it just comes out. It's very passionate, and I like to think it's usually in time, but it's not regimented. It's not nice and neat. I play a lot, but I don't know how much I actually practice, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, but there's no need to like judge how you're playing. You know what I mean? Like because you're playing for fun and that's just the way you
Aren't
want
you?
to do it.
But aren't you playing for fun too?
I am, but like I have like a teacher, I have lessons, I have, you know what I mean? So it's like I have a teacher because I want that discipline behind it. If I didn't
Yeah.
have a teacher, uh first I wouldn't progress that much probably and I would probably start to stagnate. But I just naturally like teachers. I always have teachers in my life. I just, that's just how I am. So, yeah, but like, it's okay to just play for fun or freestyle it or whatever, because you're doing it probably more from a fun relaxation thing. Like, that's just like, it's like your hobby and that's how you go about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, I mean,
I don't know.
I don't think everyone needs to do it the way I'm doing it. Not at all. Definitely.
I don't know. It's tough because like I feel like I could be amazing if I like would sit down and practice rudiments. I mean, I like the way I play, and when I play out, sometimes I'll sit in with people, and it goes fine. Like I went to Denver a couple years ago, and I met a friend at a jazz club, and they were letting people sit in, and my friend was grabbing a drink, and he was like, "Do you want a drink?" I said, "No, I think I'm gonna go up and play." He was like, "Okay," and I don't know people. I don't know. People must either they have very low expectations of me, or they just don't think much of it. But I went up there and played, and it went well. It was simple tunes, but my friend was so impressed, and then I was really kind of shocked at how impressed he was. Um, I don't know, but I do that so rarely. Like now, mostly I'm just in my garage playing with myself. Little joke.
Yeah. But I
I
mean,
don't.
I think there's like a certain genius behind you, which you probably don't think you have, but I think there is. And like, I even remember like, and my sister used to play some drums, but never really took a lot of lessons. And
Yeah.
you'd come to our house sometimes and you'd like sit on her set. And my sister has a very good ear and she's very good with rhythm. She doesn't have the desire to really like have lessons and sit down and become disciplined at it, but she could have been an excellent drummer if she had wanted, right?
Mhm.
And I remember once you were playing and she came up and she's like, he's really good. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah, Jeremy's like amazing. And then I remember like, yeah. And I remember like we were somewhere and you had played in some band with some guy and he came up and he was like, hey, how's it going? Yeah, I remember like, yeah, you played with us and you're the best drummer we've ever had. And you're like, oh, really? Like you're always kind of like humble and surprised. But
I
I
think
just think,
I'd only been playing like a couple years, maybe 3 years at that point. I don't know. I don't. I always liked it in drums and cooking. Well, singing to some degree. There are very few things that I've stuck with, and if you keep doing things, you do get better at them. And I just never did that with anything other than drums and food. That's
yeah.
about it. I don't know. Scary, but that's very sweet. I hadn't heard that before. That's very nice of your sister.
Yeah, I mean, she might not even remember saying it, but I just remember because I remember she always picked up on drums wherever, if we'd go to a concert, like we saw Billy Joel once, and I've always loved Billy Joel, and he's a pianist, and there's a genius, like major genius there too. And I remember at one point she looked at me, it was after some drummer solo, and she looked at me and she was like, he's one of the best drummers in the world. I really think he is. And I was like, really? Like I would never have picked that out. And I remember even listening to music with you sometimes. There were certain groups where you were like, listen to that drum part, and I'd be like, oh yeah, but I wouldn't have heard it on my own. So I just think like sometimes our ears kind of focus uh on different yeah, I think you have to
Yeah.
learn how to listen. Like that's what I've learned. Even with piano, my teacher in Marseille would be like, are you listening? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she'd be like, well, you sound like this. And she'd like imitate me. And she's like, I'm going to exaggerate, but this is kind of what you sound like. And I'd be like, all right. And then she'd go, but this, and I'd say, and how am I supposed to sound? And she'd be like, this is how it's written. Like, this is how you should be playing. And she'd play it. And I'd be like, oh, and she'd be like, can you do that? And I would do it. And then she'd get mad at me. And she'd be like, how come you can only do it once I ask you? And I'm like, but I was like, well, I needed to hear it. Like after you heard it, I could do it, but I had no clue what you're talking about until you played it and I could hear it then, but it's just, anyways, that's a different discussion. But I just think like, yeah, I think music is an amazing outlet and an amazing way to feel like with yourself. And yeah, I know a lot of people, I'm going to bring him on the show. Maybe he'll talk about it. I think this is so funny. So I just have to share this with you. So, well, at one point, like I hurt my pinky and I couldn't play piano. So I bought a harmonica and I was like, oh, well, I can't play piano for a couple of weeks. So I'll learn harmonica. Like I thought it'd be super easy and I couldn't, like it was not easy at all.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
And so I was telling him this and he's like, oh yeah, I play harmonica. I have like about 15 different ones. I keep him in my car. I play him all the time in my car to different jazz. And I just was like, really? Like, I have this image of him playing the harmonica in his car to music, and I think it's so funny. Like,
that I've got to see. You had to have him bring his harmonicas with him,
well,
or
he's kind of,
maybe
yeah, I hope he will.
he'll have them with him.
Yeah. But I'm going to wrap up our interview. It's been great. We talked about everything. I feel like so much. And thank you so much for sharing so much stuff that I find personal and intimate, you know?
We gotta get used to sharing the feels, right?
Yeah. You've got the good, the trendy language going.
The feels, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I've got. Feels.
Oh, I hear my daughter say stuff like beef. What's your beef?
But isn't beef like 10
Or you
years
want to
old?
beef with me? Something, I don't know. There's something that I don't get. Or
Feels.
yeah, there's fields and there's something else that I would never say because I would just feel stupid. But
That's right. You just gotta look at more memes. I don't know. All right. Well, I got my notes for the nonviolent communication, and I'm gonna go out and buy an orca. Probably not a real one. Orca. I'm gonna write that down. Orca. I'm gonna underline it. All right.
great.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you so much.